Hey, Mike, how are you?
Everything's good, man. And, it seems like the state of Philly sports is everybody just kind of seems to think it's so awful right now. I mean, is it that simple that this is just a bad time, or should we look at this with a broader picture here and realize that there's some innovation going on and that things might not be as bad as we think?
Well, I think things are pretty bad with two of the teams in town, and I think things could be promising, have a chance to be promising with two of the other teams. I think the Flyers and the Phillies are in a pretty bad way right now, and it's going to take them some time to even approach digging out of it. The Phillies have just started rebuilding after, trying to recapture what they had in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11. They finally realized they're not going to be able to do that, and they've just started the long rebuilding process. And, I thought the Flyers were on a rebuilding process. Certainly Ron Hextall is saying all the right things, and certainly at the trade deadline he had done some right things in getting that rebuilding going. And then you get Ed Snyder the other day telling Sam Donnellan from the Daily News that, we can compete for a Stanley Cup next year. We expect to compete for a Stanley Cup. All the same things that have been said for 40 years and haven't produced a Stanley Cup. So those two teams are in a pretty bad way. I think the Eagles and the Sixers hold the potential to get better more quickly. Certainly the Eagles have that opportunity. I'm not saying that Chip Kelly's moves this offseason are definitely going to work, but in the NFL, the way that, there's so much turnover, and a coach's innovation can lead to results far more quickly than in other leagues. I think the Eagles have a chance to be really good, if not next year, then in the not-too-distant future. And the same thing with the Sixers. I know it's hard to see that now, but if Joel Embiid is as good as everybody seems to think he will be and can stay healthy, and you can get another excellent player with the high draft pick they're going to have this year, and Nerlens Noel seems to be developing as they hope, then, yeah, things are going to be looking brighter for the Sixers too.
Mike, let's start then with the Flyers, where their season is about to end, and it's so weird, the streak that they're on. They're beating these playoff teams, but they're, 0-6-3 against non-playoff teams when they needed those wins the most. Is that run going to cost Craig Berube, and is that a healthy way this organization is going? I mean, they've got young forwards. They got a lot of young defenders in the minor leagues, but now it seems that they're all going to have to go through another coaching change. Is that good? And as you mentioned, it seems that Ed Snyder's comments seem to be off the timeline of Hextall, who wants to preach patience, and Snyder doesn't seem like he's as on board of that as he wants you to believe.
Well, to answer the first part of your question, yes, I do think it's going to cost Berube his job. Anybody who with realistic expectations for the Flyers this season knew they were going to struggle to make the playoffs. So in and of itself, them not making the playoffs is not necessarily an indictment of his coaching ability or the job he's done. I think what is an indictment of the job he's done is the way he's handled the guy who I think has been the Flyers' most valuable player and their best player this season. That's Steve Mason, the goalie. Jerking him in and out of the lineup, removing him from that game in Calgary just to embarrass him, the way they handled Mason's knee surgery back in February, all those sorts of things. I feel like Mason's really gotten a raw deal from the organization, and Berube's a big part of that. The other aspect to that is that, some of the changes and shuffling of the lineup, he's gotten next to no production out of Vinny Lecavalier. And, Lecavalier is the most accomplished player on the roster, and he already was an albatross to the organization with that 5-year, $22.5 million contract. Flyers had tried to trade him and couldn't. But Berube's gotten nothing out of him. If you can't move him, then you got to do something with him. And they've done nothing with him. And he's had, 15, 16 healthy scratches this season. When you've had other players such as Matt Reed and Sean Couturier and Braden Shen who really have not improved at all under Berube, and these guys are supposed to be part of this core that the Flyers are building towards. So I think independent of the fact that he didn't make the playoffs, Berube has made some pretty big mistakes this season. To answer the second part of your question, I don't know. I'm really curious to see what happens in this offseason. Hextall apparently said yesterday that there aren't going to be any major changes. That could just be a smokescreen. But I would think that, they're going to bring in another coach, and they've got to make a decision about those young guys I mentioned in particular, Shen, Couturier, Reed. It's great to say you want to build around young players, and I think the Flyers have gotten themselves in trouble over time by, blowing things up in the name of trying to win a championship or making big moves and sacrificing the future for the present. They've done that too many times. But you have to figure out if these guys can actually play. You don't want to build around, these young forwards if they're not all that good. So Hextall's got his work cut out for him this offseason. Not to mention, he's got an 82-year-old owner who wants to win a championship for all the obvious reasons that an 82-year-old owner wants to win a championship.
Mike, it almost seems that the Flyers are in the same situation the Eagles were in. They had a bunch of good players, and they could get to a certain level, but you had to make that decision. Are we just good, or are we going to be great? Do you look at the Flyers roster similar, or hey, you got a lot of good players, but no one is really – I mean, I know Voracek and Giroux probably are great players, but do they have a similar situation where there's just so many similar guys that you just got a bunch of goods and not enough greats?
I'm not even sure how many goods they have. I mean, they certainly don't have very many good defensemen on their roster this season. Maybe one or two exceptions to that. Michael Belzato's been a pleasant surprise, and as a young player, Nick Schultz has been solid. And they don't have a lot of scoring depth. These younger players that we've mentioned, haven't developed in the way that they hoped they would. So I don't look at this as a case of all that similar to what the Eagles did. I mean, the Eagles had really accomplished players. I mean, LaShawn McCoy is arguably the best running back in the NFL. Jeremy Maclin was a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver last year. Nick Foles, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in 2013. That team had gotten to the playoffs, had won a division, had been a factor in a way that the Flyers really haven't been the last two seasons.
Mike Sielski is with us, Philly.com. Looking at the state of the four teams, a little look at the Flyers there. Let's go to the Eagles because now they have been the hottest topic, and they are out in the open. Laurie speaks Tuesday, Chip Kelly yesterday, and it's obvious that Kelly's in charge of this whole thing here. Is the only way Kelly can be judged at the end is Super Bowl or bust? I mean, if he doesn't win a Super Bowl, is this whole Kelly thing a failure?
Well, I think any coach in Philadelphia who doesn't win a championship gets judged a failure. I don't think it's a failure that they took a chance on this guy, and I don't think it's bad that he's trying to do something differently. I mean, let's face it. Philadelphia has won one championship since 1983. The Eagles have never won a Super Bowl. The idea of continuing to do the same thing over and over again is pretty much the definition of insanity. So, the idea that Chip wants to do things differently, I think that's refreshing and a good way to go about things. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. I mean, he's brought on some guys with significant injury histories, and he's brought on a running back in DeMarco Murray with significant tread on his tires. But that doesn't mean it's not going to work, and it doesn't mean that Jeffrey Lurie was wrong to give Chip all this power. I mean, Howie Roseman had grown into the job as GM, but it wasn't as if he was setting the world on fire with what he was doing. I mean, there were some picks he hit on, some picks he missed on, and, he was at the forefront of that decision to kind of go the free agency route after the lockout in 2011, and it didn't work. So, I'm all for doing things differently for pretty much any of these four teams in the city because the idea of doing things the same way has not yielded all that much success.
Yeah, no question. I'm on board with, hey, if you're going to take chances now, swing. If they're taking chances, how would you grade the chances they have taken?
I like what they've done. I think it's intriguing. I like somebody like Chip who is confident, almost arrogant, and has an idea of what he is looking for. There's clearly something in these players that he's brought on, a quality or qualities that he is looking for and that he thinks he can that he can exploit and use to his advantage and turn the Eagles into a really good team. And I want to see how this plays out. It's the idea of, the whole being more than the parts. And look, I mean, they had dynamic players in offense through the last 4 or 5 years in McCoy and Jackson and Maclin. And Brent Selleck could be a terrifically productive tight end. And Michael Vick, when he was, at his peak of his Eagles time in 2010, was playing great, and it didn't get them anywhere. So, if Chip has a different way of doing this, and it involves DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews and Sam Bradford and trying to, kind of blaze a new trail, not just for the Eagles, but in the NFL at large. I mean, let's face it, the rest of the NFL wants to throw the ball pretty much, and it sure looks like Chip Kelly wants to run the ball with kind of a three-headed monster at running back with Matthews, Murray, and Darren Sproles. So let's see what he does. I think it's good that the idea that, the Eagles have a coach and a personnel guy who's going to zig when everybody else zags. I'm really fascinated at how this is going to turn out.
I am too, and I think it's very interesting the way he's approached all this, and it is, you're right, completely different, and I feel that it's so unique that the Eagles' situation is so uniquely different from almost every team in the league, and I guess that's what's going to keep us on our toes between now and a columnist at Philly.com, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and as we talk about interesting things here, let's go to the Sixers and what they've done. Nerlens Noel's name has come up so much, but how about the job Sam Hinkie's done? Is this something that you think is starting to show that it's going to work, and is it something that other teams are going to start following? That's probably a bad thing, but is this now something that Sixer fans should maybe start taking a closer look at if you haven't been paying attention to them?
I think you should. I think he's uncovered, in addition to getting a player in Noel who seems to be developing into exactly the kind of player that they thought he could be, a real force at the defensive end, certainly not a polished and finished offensive game yet, but does enough things well that he can contribute. You see the kind of players that he's kind of dug up from under rocks, like Robert Covington. Let me put it this way. If the Sixers had drafted Doug McDermott in the first round this year with that second pick that they had, instead of taking Dario Saric, and McDermott were producing in exactly the same way that Robert Covington has produced for the Sixers, people would be saying, wow, Sam Hinkie really made a good pick with that second first-round pick that the Sixers had. Well, they didn't have to waste a first-round pick to get that kind of production. He found it in a D-League guy, and he's the best outside shooter I think the Sixers have had since Kyle Korver, certainly the best homegrown one. So that's encouraging. You look at what the players like, supporting players like Ish Smith and Isaiah Cannon and guys like that. It doesn't that necessarily mean that they are going to be the backbone of a championship team or division, winning team, but he's gotten really good value for guys that he didn't have to look hard to get. And if you look at what Michael Carter-Williams and KJ McDaniels have done since they have left Philadelphia, you can make an argument that, okay, the Sixers were getting about as much as they could get out of those guys too. So I think it's intriguing. I think it's worth taking a look at. I think the day that Joel Embiid makes his home debut in the regular season, whether it's, I guess would be November for this team, as of this moment is the most important day in Philadelphia sports, the most meaningful day in Philadelphia sports. Embiid and whoever the player is that they pick with that first round pick they have this season are really going to be big keys to what this team becomes.
No doubt. And Sam Hinkie, Mike, is going to be going into his third draft. Is this a telling draft for him and where this team's going? I mean, after 3 drafts, wouldn't you think you got to start judging wins and losses at some point soon?
I think you do. I think you have to start judging next season. I think there has to be an upturn. And I think if Embiid is healthy and they make a good solid pick or picks this year, then there will be an upturn. The other thing, the thing that kind of ties Hinkie to Kelly is they both want flexibility as they kind of build what they build. Hinkie has talked about the fact that it's not just the idea of we're going to gather all these young players and let them grow. What you get with these promising young players and what you get with draft picks is the flexibility to either let the ones you like grow or package them in a trade if an opportunity should present itself. And I think Kelly is trying to do the same thing. He wants flexibility at certain positions. He wants flexibility within the salary cap. He turned LaShawn McCoy's money basically into Kiko Alonso, DeMarco Murray, and Ryan Matthews. So that's the kind of flexibility that I'm talking about here. And like I said, the word I just keep coming back to is fascinating because these two guys are doing things so differently from the way they've been done before. And I think part of the reason people are skeptical, to be quite honest, is that neither Sam Hinkie nor Chip Kelly is from the Philadelphia area. They're not guys we're familiar with. They don't have this kind of long track record in pro sports that is kind of reassuring to a fan base. Oh, okay, Larry Brown's coached a million places and he's won. If Larry Brown says that this is the way building a championship team should be done, well, he has credibility. We'll listen to him. Well, if nobody's tried to do it the way that Hinkie and Kelly are doing it, there's nobody out there who's going to say, hey, these guys are doing it the right way. So that's a little scary. That's a little, it's uncertain. And in Philadelphia, with our sports teams, we don't like uncertain.
Mike Sielski is a sports columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Philly ESPN.com. And then you have the Phillies, who, were the kings of the town they had it in their palm of their hands, and they blew it. The fact now is that they're probably in the worst position of the four. But how bad is it really? Is it as bad as most? I was in Clearwater last week, Mike. Nothing. No buzz, no pulse, zippo. I've been going 10 years, and nobody cared. It's almost this team could have done no wrong, and here they are now sleepwalking through a season. How bad is it? Is it as bad as it seems?
I think it's pretty bad for this season and next season. And there's no guarantee. I think there's even less guarantee with the Phillies and the way you have to kind of build a team in Major League Baseball that they're going to get good again anytime soon. When they were having all that success, remember, they got caught up a little bit in, trying to maintain that level and doing whatever it took to maintain that level. And they made some bad choices, spending a lot of money on Jonathan Papelbon, when they really didn't need a closer, or certainly to spend that much money on a closer, letting Jason Worth walk away, trading Hunter Pence after you got somebody who could replace Worth. A succession of really bad decisions, a succession of really bad drafts, and missing on players and failing to replenish the farm system. Well, going into replenishing a farm system, there are multiple factors to have to consider. A, are you finding the right players? B, once you get those right players, are you developing them in the right way? And, after that slew of prospects turned major leaguers that they had in the late 90s and the early 2000s with Rollins, Utley, Howard, Hamels, Ryan Madsen, Carlos Ruiz, there haven't been all that many to come through since. And that's something that's got to get fixed and got to get fixed quickly. They've taken some steps towards doing that. Ruben Amaro, on paper, has made some decent trades to get some pitching prospects. But this is going to be a long time coming before they get good again. And this is going to be a long, long season, I think. Right now, Jerome Williams is your number 3 starter. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, it really is. And obviously the whole Hamels thing, how do you think, Mike, that's been handled? Is this by the book, or do you think they've missed even – the fact that they are in the spot that they are now, have they even mismanaged this Hamels thing?
No, I don't think they have yet. I think they're doing the right thing by holding on to Hamels and seeing how the market shapes up. Let's be honest, a lot can happen. But you're taking the chance that a pitcher who has been very, very durable throughout his career, who's made at least 30 starts every year since 2007, will make 30 starts again. That's a pretty good bet. Cole knows how to take care of himself. And so you wait for the market to develop, and you wait for teams to get a little more desperate once the season hits June, July, the trade deadline approaches, and you see what you can get. I don't have an issue with Ruben Amaro, waiting to make a move to trade away Cole Hamels, because to do so now, you don't know how the market's going to change. But is there going to be an ace pitcher who gets hurt? Is there going to be a team that comes out of nowhere to challenge for a division championship or the wild card that needs that stud pitcher? So Amaro's playing his cards close to his chest, and I think he's right to do that.
All right, Mike, we've got 4 teams, not a lot of success, no playoffs for any of them. But which team are you most interested in and should be giving fans the most hope?
Probably the Eagles, I would say, and it's close between them and the Sixers. The backlash to what Sam Hinkie has done has been so great. And I don't root for any of these teams. I grew up rooting for them, but at this point in my job, I don't care. The Sixers can go 0-82, they can go 82-0. There's no skin off my nose one way or another. But the backlash to what Hinkie has done has been so great, I feel like, that there is a part of me that would like to see them succeed, just so that, so that he can kind of say, if he wants to, like, ha, 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 I really didn't know what I was doing. Because if you look around, I think kind of all the right people are criticizing what he's doing, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. But I think in the here and the now, the Eagles, have the greater opportunity, to turn this thing around and turn it around quickly. Chip Kelly basically took Andy Reid's players and turned them from a 4-win team to a 10-win team in 1 year, and then, suffered some significant injuries last year and had them at 10 wins again. So, given free reign now, I think the possibility that they can challenge for a division title again, get themselves in the playoff mix and make some hay that's the sliver of optimistic light I would have if I were a Philly sports fan.
All right, everybody. Mike Sielski, columnist from Philly.com, the Philadelphia Inquirer, at Mike Sielski on Twitter. Nice little diatribe on the sad state of Philadelphia sports with a little bright light at the end of the tunnel. Always a pleasure, Mike. Thanks so much.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me.